Hello guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. In the next upcoming sessions, we'll be handling AWS Cloud Practitioner exam questions, and each exam is divided into two videos. So let's get started. Which security issue is primarily addressed by using multi-factor authentication? Option A, a stolen password. Option B, open ports on a server. Option C, stolen hard drive. Option D, an encrypted network traffic. So multi-factor authentication helps to solve a stolen password. Question 2. Which pillar of the AWS well-architected framework refers to the ability of a system to recover from infrastructure or service disruptions and dynamically acquire computing resources to meet demand? Option A, is it security? Option B, is it reliability? Option C, is it performance efficiency? Option D, cost optimization. So AWS The AWS pillar that helps to recover from infrastructure or service disruptions is reliability. Reliability has a design principle called automatic recovery from failure. So apart from the four of them, we have other two pillars of AWS well-architected framework. We have sustainability and operational excellence. Question 3. Your company has data centers on premises. You're planning to move to the AWS cloud. What is the primary value proposition of cloud computing? Reduced effort and investment in staff training. Option B, less expenditure changing from operational expenses to capital expenses. Option C, less expenditure changing from capital expenses to operational expenses. Option D, resource sharing and parallel executions of applications on multiple on-premise data centers. So the answer is option C. It's less expenditure changing from capital expenses to operational expenses. Question 4. Which of the following are benefits of migrating to AWS cloud? Choose two. So at this point, I would like to state that if you choose one, and while you're told to choose two, and by any chance you are right, then that question you automatically fail. Benefits of migrating to AWS cloud. So option A, operational resilience. Option B, discount for product on Amazon.com. Option C, business agility. Option D, business excellence. Option E, increased staff retention. So definitely the answer is operational resilience and business agility. Question 5. The main benefit of decoupling an application is to create a highly integrated application. Option B, reduce interdependencies so failures do not impact other components. Option C, enable data synchronization across the web application layer. Option D, have the ability to execute automated bootstrapping actions. So decoupling is a situation whereby you have a monolith application and you want to subdivide the application into smaller parts that are interdependent on each other. So the answer to this question is reduced interdependencies so failures do not impact other components. Question 6. Which of the following solutions can improve the performance of a web server that receives high levels of traffic running an online banking portal? Select 2. So option A, a web server to be configured with a private IP address and hosted behind a NAT gateway. Option B, web server to be configured with IP address and hosted behind a WAF. Option C, for an added layer of security, host the web server on a CDN. Option D, use SSL acceleration or secure socket layer acceleration. Option E, relieve computational overhead on the web server by offloading HTTPS session processes to hardware security modules in an AWS Cloud HSM cluster. So option D and E work together, and they also help to improve the web server performance. So they both work hand in hand. Question 7. Which ongoing aspect of operations will reduce if a company moves its servers to AWS cloud? Option A, idle capacity. Option B, software patching. Option C, software licenses. Option D, redundant servers. So we definitely want to reduce any capacity that is not working for us. So for this question, idle capacity is our answer. Question 8. When designing a highly available architecture, What is the difference between vertical scaling or scaling up and horizontal scaling out? So scaling up provides for highly availability, while scaling out brings fault tolerance. Option B, scaling out is not cost effective compared to scaling up. Well, that doesn't make sense. Scaling up adds more resources to an instance. Scaling out adds more instances. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Then option D, auto-scaling groups require scaling up, whilst launch configurations use scaling out. Well, that doesn't make sense. So I'll go with option C. Question 9. Which component of the AWS global infrastructure is made up of one or more discrete data centers that have redundant power, networking, and connectivity? Option A, is it an AWS region? Well, that doesn't make sense at all. Option B, availability zone. Option C, edge location. Option D, AWS outposts. So definitely the answer is availability zone. So question 10, S3 intelligent tiering object storage class delivers automatic cost savings by moving data between which of the two access tiers? So option A, standard access and frequent access. Option B, frequent access and infrequent access. Option C, standard access and infrequent access. Option D, standard access and one zone infrequent access. The answer to this question is a frequent access and infrequent access. So S3 intelligent tiering stores objects in two access tiers. One tier that is optimized for frequent access and another lower cost tier that is optimized for infrequent access. Question 11. How will a company reduce their total cost of ownership, TOC, when they use AWS instead of traditional data centers? Option A, encryption. Option B, identity and management. Option C, shared security model. Option D, elastic computing. So definitely, if it's TOC, then it's elastic computing. Well, some of these options here fall under total cost of technology. Question 12. A company is planning to run a global market application in the AWS cloud. The application will feature videos that can be viewed by users. The company must ensure that all users can view these videos with low latency. Which AWS service should the company use to meet this requirement? Option A, AWS autoscaling. Option B, Amazon Kinesis video streams. Option C, elastic load balancing. Option D, Amazon CloudFront. AWS autoscaling means we add resources on demand. Amazon Kinesis video streams, that's an AWS managed service that you can use to stream live video from your devices to AWS. The Kinesis video streams can also be used in building apps for real-time video streaming. A load balancer distributes incoming application traffic across multiple EC2 instances across multiple availability zones. Load balancers will detect unhealthy instances and route traffic only to healthy instances. Well, AWS CloudFront is a content delivery network. Amazon CloudFront is a content delivery network service built for high performance, security, and developer convenience. Reduces latency by delivering data through the 410 plus global dispersed points of presence with an automated network mapping and intelligent routing. Question 12. An organization needs to deploy AWS resources on-premise without letting the traffic go through the public internet. What should they configure to achieve this? Option A, NAT gateway. Option B, a VPC. Option C, site-to-site VPN. Option D, AWS Direct Connect. Organizations should use Direct Connect to connect directly to AWS Cloud without using the public internet. To use this, the organization will need to acquire or lease a connection to an AWS Direct Connect location. So for this particular question, you might get confused with if they had put Amazon private link and also the AWS site-to-site virtual private network or VPN. Maybe just to mention on AWS site-to-site VPN, what happens when you create a VPC in AWS and on the other hand you have a on-premise network. So that's where site-to-site VPN comes in. For a NAT gateway or a network address translation service, it is used to connect instances in a private subnet to services outside of a VPC. Question 14, there's an external audit being carried out in your company. The IT auditor needs to have a log of all access to the AWS resources in a company's account. Which of the below services can assist in providing these details? Option A, AWS CloudWatch. Option B, AWS CloudTrail. Option C, AWS Trusted Advisor. Option D, AWS Simple Notification Service. If you hear of logs that need to be accessed, you hear of maybe an audit that needs to be carried out, then AWS CloudTrail will be our answer. CloudTrail can monitor all API activity conducted on AWS services. AWS CloudTrail is a service that enables governance, compliance, operational auditing, and risk auditing of your AWS account. With CloudTrail, you can log, continuously monitor, and retain account activity related to actions across your AWS infrastructure. AWS Trusted Advisor, well, a trusted advisor provides recommendations that help you to follow AWS practices that will help you optimize your AWS infrastructure, improve your security and performance, reduce cost, and monitor service quotas. AWS CloudWatch, it's a monitoring service that will give you the visual representation of performance and health of your AWS resources and applications. So it's CloudWatch will give you a dashboard that will show you the performance and health of your resources. For SNS, that's a simple notification service. It's used to notify the users. Maybe it might notify the user via email, via text message, and so on. Question 15. A startup company for social media apps would like to grant freelance developers temporary access to its Lambda functions set up on AWS. These developers will be signing in via Facebook authentication. Which service is most appropriate in securely granting access? Option A, create user credentials using IAM. Option B, use Amazon Cognito for Web Identity Federation. Option C, use temporary access roles using IAM. Option D, use a third-party web ID federated access provider. So definitely it's use Amazon Cognito. So Amazon Cognito Web Identity Federation service acts as a broker that allows successfully authenticated users access to AWS resources. After successful authentication on platforms such as Facebook, LinkedIn, or Google, users are awarded temporary authentication code from Amazon Cognito, thereby gaining temporary access. Well, question 16. Which duties are the responsibility of a company that is using AWS Lambda? Choose two. Security inside of code, selection of CPU resources, patching an operating system, writing and updating of code. Option E, security of underlying infrastructure. For AWS Lambda, the developer or the users will write their own code. So definitely you have to, number one, have to have security inside of your code. So AWS will not be responsible for any security leak inside of your code. Number two, you are the one as the user who will be responsible for writing and updating of your code. So Lambda runs your code on high availability compute infrastructure and performs all the administration of your compute resources. This includes server and operating system maintenance, capacity provisioning, and automatic scaling, code and security patch deployment, code monitoring and logging also. All you need to do is supply the code or write the code. Question 17. A user is planning to launch 3 EC2 instances behind a single elastic load balancer. The deployment should be highly available. What should the user do? Option A, launch the instances across multiple availability zones in an AWS region. launch the instances as EC2 spot instance in the same AWS region and the same availability zone. Option C, launch the instances in multiple AWS regions and use elastic IP address or addresses. Option D, launch the instances as an EC2 reserved instances in the same AWS region but in different availability zones. The answer is option A. You are supposed to launch the instance across multiple availability zones in an AWS region. And it is recommended that you launch in at least two availability zones in each region, so that in case one fails, then you'll have the advantage of using the other, or your traffic will using a load balancer will be deployed to the other EC2 instance on the other availability zone. So the answer is option A. Question 18. A startup organization would like to instantaneously deploy a complex web and mobile application deployment environment, complete with the necessary resources and peripheral assets. How can this be achieved efficiently? Option A, by putting together the necessary components from AWS services, starting with EC2 instances. Option B, creating an AWS Lambda function that will be triggered by a single button click to call the appropriate API of the respective resources and peripheral assets needed. Option C, using AWS Quick Starts to identify and provision the appropriate AWS CloudFormation templates. Option D, making use of the AWS Serverless Application Repository to identify and deploy the resources needed for a web and mobile application development environment. The answer is using AWS Quick Starts to identify and provision the appropriate AWS Cloud Information templates. Which AWS service or feature allows users to connect with and deploy AWS services programmatically? Option A, AWS Management Console. Well, we don't write any code on the console. AWS Cloud9 is like an IDE. Then AWS Code Pipeline, well, that doesn't make sense. AWS Software Development Kits, yes, this one will definitely help us to connect, and the catch was connect and deploy AWS services programmatically. So AWS Software Development Kits or SDKs will help us to connect and deploy. But for Cloud9 will just help us to write the code. So the answer becomes option D. Question 19. A business wishes to grant access to Amazon RDS to one of its workers. Additionally, the corporation wishes to confine contract to AWS CLI and AWS SDKs. Which combination of measures should a business do in order to satisfy these needs while adhering to the concept of least privilege? Select 2. Create an IAM user and provide AWS Management Console access only. Option B, create an IAM user and provide programmatic access only. Option C, create an IAM role and provide AWS Management Console access only. Option C, create an IAM policy with administrator access and attach it to IAM user. Option E, create an IAM policy with Amazon RDS access and attach it to the IAM user. So this one we go with option B and option E. So you create an IAM user and provide programmatic access only, and options E, we create an IAM policy with Amazon RDS access and attach it to the IAM user. Question 21. Which AWS service provide infrastructure security optimization recommendations? So I think we have already discussed this one. The AWS Trusted Advisor will provide recommendations that will help you do the recommended AWS practices that are best for your application. And a Trusted Advisor will provide real-time guidance on how you could provision your resources. Question 22. An organization utilizes a software suite that consists of multitude of underlying microservices hosted on the AWS cloud. The application is frequently giving runtime errors. Which service will help in the troubleshooting process? Option A, is it Amazon CloudTrail? Well, we said CloudTrail will help you in security auditing of your account. CloudWatch, we said, will provide you the dashboard to monitor performance and health of your AWS resources. Is it AWS X-Ray? Helps developers analyze and debug production. Distributed applications, such as those built using microservices architecture. With X-Ray, developers can understand how the application and its underlying services are performing to identify and troubleshoot the root cause of performance issues and errors. X-Ray provides an end-to-end view of requests as they travel through an application and shows a map of an application's underlying components. Question 23. A user is comparing purchase options for an application that runs on Amazon EC2 and Amazon RDS. The application cannot sustain any interruption. The application experiences a predictable amount of usage, including some seasonal spikes that last only a few weeks at a time. It is not possible to modify the application. Which purchase option meets these requirements most cost effectively? So the catch here is that the application cannot sustain any interruption. So let's see the answers. Review the AWS marketplace and buy partial upfront reserved instances to cover the predicted and seasonal load. Well, that doesn't make sense. Buy reserved instances for the predicted amount of usage throughout the year. Allow any seasonal usage to run on spot instances. We don't want the seasonal usage to be running on the spot instances. Option C, buy reserved instances for the predicted amount of usage throughout the year. Allow any seasonal usage to run at an on-demand rate. Well, that makes sense, because if the application will have some seasonal spikes that may run maybe between 1 to 2 weeks, then we need to run that application while it is on demand. Because option D, buy reserved instances to cover all potential usage that results from the seasonal usage. Well, that doesn't make any sense actually. So the answer is option C. Question 24. A radio station compiles a list of most popular songs each year and will seldom refer to the information thereafter. Listeners can get access to this information up to 24 hours after request. Which is the most cost-effective object storage for this information? The listeners will get this information up to 24 hours after request. That means it cannot, when the users request for this information, they will get it after 24 hours. So Deep Archive is the most cost-effective object storage to implement, because the information will be rarely accessed, and when it is accessed, its retrieval period is not instant. Question 25. You want to retain data for 7 years in order to comply with the set regulatory standards. Which AWS service meets this need for the least amount of money? Option A, AWS S3. Option B, AWS Snowball. Option C, Amazon Redshift. Amazon S3 Glacier. So the answer is Amazon S3 Glacier. Amazon S3, well, that's a bucket service like Amazon S3 Glacier. So Amazon Snowball, that is a tool used to transfer petabytes of data. So Amazon Redshift, well, that's a database. Question 26. AWS Cloud Formation is intended to assist the user in which of the following ways? Option A, model and provision resources. Option B, update application code. Option C, set up data lakes. Option D, create report for billing. The answer is option A, model and provision resources. So AWS CloudFormation provides a common language for you to model and provision AWS and third-party application resources in your cloud environment. AWS CloudFormation allows you to use programming languages or a simple text file to model and provision in an automated and secure manner all the resources needed for your application across all regions and accounts. This gives you a single source of truth for your AWS and third-party resources. Question 27. What can be termed as a user-defined label that has a key value pair of variable character length? It is assigned to AWS resources as metadata for administration and management purposes. The catch here is a key value pair of variable character length. That's a resource tag. A resource tag are a critical component when architecting cloud, and they create an identifying mechanism for the user to group, classify, and order all their provisioned resources appropriately. Question 28. Which of the following statements about scalability is most accurate? Choose 2. Option A. A scalable system diverts traffic based on demand. Option B. A scalable system diverts traffic to instances with the least load. That makes some sense. Option C. A scalable system redirects load to load balancers within Route 53. No. A scalable system diverts traffic across multiple regions. No. A scalable system diverts traffic to instances with higher capacity. Definitely no. So the answer becomes option A and option B. Question 29. According to AWS, what is the benefit of elasticity? Minimize storage requirements by reducing logging and auditing activities. Option B, create systems that scale to their required capacity based on changes on demand. Option C, enable AWS to automatically select the most cost-effective services. Option D, accelerate the design process because recovery from failure is automated, reducing the need for testing. So the answer becomes option B, create systems that scale to the required capacity based on changes in demand. Question 30, a company wants to migrate its workloads to AWS, but it lacks expertise in AWS computing. Which AWS service or feature will help the company with its migration? Option A, AWS Trusted Advisor. Option B, AWS Consulting Partners. Option C, AWS Artifacts. Option D, AWS Managed Services. AWS Consulting Partners are professional service firms that help customers design, architect, build, mitigate, and manage their workloads and applications on AWS. That marks the end of part 1. So if you feel that there is any question that is wrong, please make sure to put it on the comment section, and also check out for part 2. Thank you.